Hello, and welcome once again to Political Payne Live. I'm your host, Joe Payne, doing a special episode. Friday nights, I usually do kind of a news breakdown, but it is my privilege to welcome two guests from from MICOP, the Mixteco Indigena Community Organizing Project at MICOP, MICOP. And we have Executive Director Arsenio Lopez and Associate Director Genevieve Flores-Haro. And so I want to welcome you both to Political Payne. Thank you for being here. Your organization, MICOP, was recently awarded 2021 Nonprofit of the Year by State Senator Monique Limon. I would love for you both just to introduce MICOP to my audience, whoever's watching it now live or in the future. What is MICOP all about? And, we'll talk about how I first became familiar with y'all.
Great. Thank you. And thank you for the invitation. My name is Arsenio Lopez. I'm the Executive Director with Mixteco Indigena Community Organizing Project, MICOP or MICOP. Many people from our communities call us Proyecto Mixteco or Mixteco Project. So the organization was founded in 2001 with a mission to support, organize, and empower the indigenous migrant communities in California's Central Coast. And our population that we are mainly working with is the indigenous migrant communities. Many of these communities are from the indigenous community of Mixtecos. And we have also Zapotecos and Purepecha and other indigenous people that comes mostly from the southern part of Mexico country, speaking our own language, which is different from Spanish or English. It's a native language. It's kind of like Navajo language to English or Chumash language to English. So it's unique. It's a lot of us, we come from civilizations that is more than 7,000 years old. And our organizations has different programs for our communities that goes to community empowerment or community organizing work. I will let our Associate Director to introduce herself.
Yeah, hi everyone, and thank you again, like Arsenio said, for the opportunity. I'm Genevieve Flores-Haro, Associate Director here for MICOP. And yeah, I think, as Arsenio mentioned, we were founded by a nurse practitioner. We've been in Ventura County now for the last 20 years, celebrating 20 years actually this year, and really active and up and running in Santa Maria the last 3 years. And just really, what we offer is a breadth and depth of services and programs for the community. I like to think of our work in 3 prongs, right? We offer direct assistance to community members, and that could be anything from the case management work that we do for children 0 to 3, or for families of children with living with disabilities, or domestic violence casework, mental health, Medi-Cal enrollment, that kind of direct assistance work. Then another branch, we have community organizing work around labor rights, or even training domestic violence survivors to be leaders and to be organizers. And then lastly, we have a policy advocacy arm. And so really looking at systemic change from grassroots up to grass tops. And so yeah, I guess that's a little bit in a nutshell what we offer. I always forget the radio station, and I know the radio station is a big deal, and we can talk about that later, but we're also home to a community radio station. And then just outside of programming, right, language preservation, cultural preservation work is really ingrained in what we do. So a little bit of everything.
Yeah, and that's something that I found interesting about MICOP was how many different kind of like you know I don't know what you call it subsets of things that you do for the Mixteco and Indigenous community here on the Central Coast of California. For anybody watching this, we're on the Central Coast. That's kind of in between Southern California and the Bay Area, right? And so MICOP is based in Ventura, Oxnard area, right? And also Santa Maria, California, which is where I'm from. But could you tell, you talked a little bit about it, Arsenio, but tell us about this community. Like you said, that Spanish is not their first language, but they speak a few different languages, and that's a big part of the services that your organization provides. But tell me a bit about these people. I know in Santa Maria we have a large, relatively speaking, Oaxacan community, indigenous folks from Oaxaca. But there, like you said, there are folks from other states in Mexico as well. Go ahead, whoever wants to take that.
Of course. Um, I would like to add that there was a study in 2009 or 2010, because we don't really have a census that provides us with that information about the specific numbers of indigenous migrant communities. For many reasons, many of us were being, kind of lost within the Hispanic Latino classification, and not necessarily identified as Mixtecos or Zapotecos or Purépechas or any like indigenous kind of like groups or populations. So there was an independent study. It's kind of old, but that told us that about 200,000 indigenous farm workers work in the agriculture industry of California. So that's more than like probably 10 years old study. So right now I will say that at least 60 to 70% of the ag force is being represented by people who comes from indigenous communities in Mexico. Um, and the other thing that it's important to know is that indigenous people are not only coming from the state of Oaxaca. There's a large population of Mixteco people working in the agriculture industry that comes from the state of Oaxaca, true, but also we have Mixtecos from the state of Guerrero and Mixtecos from the state of Puebla. We have other groups, like I mentioned it before. Zapotecos is another large group. We have identified indigenous people from the Wade Nation, indigenous people from Otomi, Nahuatl, Maya, Triqui communities. Um, so we have all these like different communities. There's a lot of diversity that comes with people that comes from Mexico. Mexico itself has 68 indigenous nations or indigenous communities still alive and still have their own culture, their own languages, their own traditions, and so on. So oftentimes, because of historically speaking, oftentimes we don't feel safe to identify ourselves as indigenous people, because we want to avoid many issues that we have already historically have we brought with us. We want to avoid discrimination, we want to avoid prejudice, and also when it comes down to like services, having access to services. If you go and if you say that you're limited in Spanish, they might say like, well, there's no way for us to communicate with you, right? So there's all these different factors that plays into us being able to identify as indigenous communities. So our organization for the last 20 years is one of the works or goals to bring this visibility, to not only the presence of these communities, and but also the challenges or oftentimes the barriers that we find in the system when it comes down to having access, right, to basic resources. And that's one of the challenges we have identified during this time. So in terms of COVID, language is sometimes the primary challenge that we face. not only in Spanish, or English, but in our own indigenous languages.
Yes, I know someone who it has the trifecta here in town who can do all three, and they're in high demand all the time. Tell me about that part of MICOP, the language services, because like you said, that's a huge part of for the Mixteco and speakers that they, like you said, they'll go to try to seek services or anything else. Really, I mean, we don't think about all the different things, whether it's a grocery store or a government service or whatever else, where you have a double language barrier on you all the time. How does MICOP try to help that and aid the community in that way?
Genevieve, if you want to add to that?
Yeah, I'll add to that. So we do offer our own interpretation service, and I will say that it is a little bit, it is different than some of the other services that are out there that are available to agencies that are trying to serve the population that we work with. Partly because a lot of the work that my MICOP has been doing around language is around the importance of identifying our community members' hometown, where their village is, because there's geographic variance based in Mixteco, for example. So, for example, if the villages are close together, they can understand pretty well, versus if there's like an hour, 2 hour, 3 hour, distance. Sometimes they can't understand in between. Also, although they're both speaking Mixteco, there's variance in the language. And then kind of what Arsenio was saying, like the other states where Mixteco is spoken, sometimes they can't understand each other at all. And so part of our interpreter services is identifying what pueblo, what village the person comes from, so that we can deploy an interpreter that speaks or that's as close to that variant as possible, so that we can get a good match. Because if you get an interpreter, you're going to hope that they're able to interpret for you, right? But a lot of providers aren't aware of the geographic variant that exists in the language. So that's something that we offer that's a little bit different than some of the other service providers. I will say we did have a case a couple of years ago with one of the bigger service providers where they said that they had a Mixteco speaker, and our caseworker who speaks Mixteco was on the line with the client, and there was the interpreter from the third party and then the agency. And so the agency is thinking, they're in good faith, they're in compliance, they have an interpreter through this third party. But really that third party, that Mixteco speaker, was just speaking Spanish very slowly. Because also these agencies, because they offer such a breadth of languages, they can't necessarily test for every language that they're offering. And so, not to shade the other groups, not to shade the bigger agencies, but at least with us, they're vetted, and again, we're going to do the best placement that we can.
Sounds like a challenge, though, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So you can imagine, like, when we brought that to the agency, we're like, by the way, like, this is the service that you're getting, and maybe you should consider a contract with us. And I believe they switched over. So,
well, that's good. You also do the way that I became familiar with MICOP is through some labor organizing that I'm aware of the organization doing here in Santa Maria Valley around a couple different ag companies, where basically you have ununionized, non-unionized workers who were asking for better pay. And they hit a deadlock with management. Let me see. I think I can do a screen share here for the story from my website. Let me do that. Here it is. So we see here, this is from my website, politicalpayne.com. But it really was the fact that these workers kind of spontaneously went on strike out of solidarity with a coworker, but then organizers with MICOP were able to come around and help them and aid them in getting an agreed upon demands, and really trying to push this company for better pay. And we can see here in this video, we have a guy, and he's kind of leaning over this woman here, and the dynamic here is that she's speaking Spanish, and he starts berating her Spanish. and kind of talking down to her that she's not speaking Spanish correctly. And so this is just something I recognize as a dynamic that we see in labor, where management can intimidate labor and use whatever tool they have in their toolkit. Can y'all explain like that this particular dynamic that Indigenous not just farm workers, but labor, any type of worker deals with in general?
Well, I want to say that agricultural workers or farm workers are among the lowest paid workers, are among the more vulnerable groups or population of workers that we have in California. Um, you know, a lot of the farm worker has um, the lack of what we call the proper documentation, right? The legal status. So that by itself already gives a lot of disadvantages to these workers to feel confident to fight for their rights, even though we need to separate your right as a workers versus your right as your legal status or whatever that is. But what we have seen, what is a common practice, is that oftentimes these crew leaders or supervisors are aware of that situation with our workers and they wanted to take advantage on that, right? So and farm workers, they don't want to lose their jobs. They don't want to speak out because every time they speak out, they are afraid to lose their jobs. The other challenges with these workers, as I said, earlier on, I said 60 to 70% of the workers, farm workers, are from indigenous communities. So we want to say that many of these, they feel comfortable speaking in their indigenous languages. And what we have seen that oftentimes, as we can see it in the videos, in the video that you're just showing to us, clearly I can see that the supervisor or the crew leaders is not necessarily speaking an indigenous language so they can communicate there. The person who is a worker is put in disadvantage trying to articulate her points, right? As a worker, trying to be strong and make her case, but it's being hard if she's not fluently in Spanish. And of course, the supervisor is trying to like take advantage of that, on that, and this is like power dynamic, and this is another kind of example of historical context among indigenous people when they come to Mexico, because we have to also understand that historically speaking, we're carrying, as indigenous people, we're carrying history of discrimination and history of prejudice that oftentimes they're making us feel or putting ourselves in the lower status, right? Telling us that our language has no value, that we have to learn Spanish, that we have to learn English, that and that being indigenous it's kind of like sad, and it's kind of like you don't have power, or you don't have a formal education, or you're ignorant. So there's all these kind of internalized stuff already going on, but also these people who oftentimes they don't identify themselves as indigenous, as we are seeing in the video, is aware of that, and that's a power dynamic, and adding to that, the legal status, being afraid to lose their job when you're speaking out. There's a system of oppression and these type of work offers times that we see. So myself personally speaking, when I saw that case, when I saw this woman being very strong, doing her best to articulate and make her case, it's not common to see that. And when you see that from when a worker speaks out, I think that's what really is when we realize, and when the workers themselves recognize the power that they have, right? And that's part of the work that we do in the organizing work, supporting these workers and helping them see that as a workers they have rights, there are laws that protects them, and that they have a voice. As long as they use that voice, there are laws who protects them, right? So that's kind of like what I'm seeing there. Genevieve, I don't know if you have anything to add to that.
I think the only thing that I would add is that particular clip went viral. I would say it went pretty viral. And that is just one instance caught on camera. I can guarantee you that situation plays itself out on agriculture fields across the state of California. this exact scenario where, big, big supervisor, is intimidating, trying to intimidate a woman, right? Trying to
Yeah.
use his size to intimidate her, trying to talk down to her and says that her Spanish isn't any good. When quite frankly, like, she speaks two languages, right? And there's
Yeah.
a power there in and of itself, right? And one of the languages she speaks is over 3,000 years old. And
Yeah.
she's right there, and she's, not stepping down, right? And I think that's just power, right? And that's power in action. But again, it just makes me think of all the other cases that we don't get to see, all the other cases that don't come out to a strike, and how these cycles and systems, just repeat themselves.
Definitely. Her Spanish is better than mine, that's for sure. Were you going to say something, Arsenio?
Yeah, I just want to add, if it's important also to say and to point it out what I've been seeing there. If we listen to the audio, it says, if you don't like it, you can leave now, right? That's what the
Yeah.
supervisor is telling the worker. Like, basically, this is a power dynamic. The supervisor, if you don't like it, you can leave now. What is the message there? The message there is that these workers are disposable. They are not treating with dignity. Like, I can do whatever I want with you, and if you don't like it, you can leave right now because I can replace you. Which is totally not appropriate, and this is oftentimes what we see, and that's exactly what workers are afraid to like confront or put themselves in a position. That's why they don't speak, and that's one of the reasons that of the importance of the work that we do, in terms with organizing, in terms with leadership development, and letting them know their rights and all that. Oftentimes you will see all these laws being books, but what it really needs is that I feel like it needs 2-3 things. It needs the reinforcement system that is there to protect these workers, because one thing is to say it on the street, in our office here, organize workers and tell them, and it's different when it comes down to like in the workplace, right? To stand and defend your rights. The other thing is what it has to do this with us, that we're not farm workers, right? We need to understand where our food is coming from. Who is picking up this fruit? Who is there, putting all, not only their physical, bodies, which is a hard job to do. It's very difficult to find workers. Employers in the agriculture industry right now is telling us that they are having a lot of a worker shortage, right? But we don't often appreciate. I don't see that these work is being appreciated. Not only during the COVID, I just want to say this too, that during the COVID there was all these caravans, which is great. It's amazing. I think it's good to go and send these messages to our workers and say, we're here for you. Thank you for being essential workers, because if it were not for you all, I will not have food for my family, right? It's great. But I think what workers is lacking is a better compensations, because we don't know if this worker has enough funding to buy healthy food for their families, safe housing for their families, right? We don't, because we know they're getting very low pay for this job. And that's another thing I want to point out here, the demand that they were doing in that strike, they were just fighting for a few cents.
Yeah.
They're not fighting, they were not fighting for big buckets. It's just few
Dimes, right? Yeah.
right?
Yeah, dimes per box. It was something else. And here in Santa Maria Valley, I mean, you're absolutely right about the amount of work this is, and then the pay. It's something I harp on a lot. I mean, I've looked at the crop report on this channel. It's $1 billion industry in Santa Barbara County alone. But then when you see early in the pandemic, this is another story from my website. Sorry, I'm doing a lot of self-promotion here, but one of the first coronavirus deaths in Santa Maria was a man kept in guest worker housing, which was it was in H2A housing, and I believe the company had bought like a motel, but then people were getting infected, so they were buying them rooms at Motel 6. So this man, his name was Leo Begario Chavez Alvarado, passed away alone in a Motel 6 room from coronavirus. I mean, this was at the beginning. I think the day they announced that this had happened, earlier that day, I'm sure y'all are familiar with CAUSE, here in Santa Maria. They were at all the public meetings saying we need protections for farm workers because this is coming for us and they don't have protection at all.
And, having had to carry, some of the COVID work here for the organization, like, it was incredibly frustrating to be an advocate during that time, just because we knew it was coming, right? We knew it was coming. It was not like, it was when is it going to happen? And then when it finally happened and he passed away, it was something completely avoidable, absolutely, completely avoidable. And then when further, right, outbreaks happened within the H2A population, what could we do better, right? What can we do better so that we can prevent more farm workers from dying? My understanding of the numbers, at least in Santa Maria, is 25% of the cases were farm workers in Santa Maria. It was a sizable number of cases for coronavirus. And again, it's to your point, like, we have this gentleman like Leo, probably was indigenous, probably not really understanding what was happening to him, put up in a hotel. They're supposed to give them food, right? They're supposed to do warm meal delivery. Was that happening? We don't know. And then how do we communicate with the family that what's happened to him? And again, a lot of it was preventable. I will say, and I will give props to public health. After the fact, right, the director was like, well, okay, let's make, pods, right? Let's designate, like, it was in her power to create pods of H2A workers. Okay, so these four are a pod, and that means they'll do grocery runs together, they'll work together, and then that's the folks that are sleeping, together to try and keep that distance within the H2A workers. But again, even in Ventura County, we were asking for inspections of these sites, and it wasn't until we had our own outbreak, summer 2020, about 200 H2A workers infected with COVID, where we saw any movement and any traction in getting those inspections conducted.
Yeah, I seem to remember that, and the Santa Barbara County Public Health Department isn't. Everybody deserves criticism, but they haven't been as bad as some other agencies have been. But I just remember seeing. I mean, we had situations where the county is delivering their report to the city, and the city's getting crappy with the county. Because our numbers were going up, and it was just this bureaucratic back and forth, and it was just time we didn't have. And the strange thing to me is that at that time, the county public health had done a survey of people in the county, including farm workers. And at that time, farm workers were more informed about social distancing, best practice of COVID than most people who were asked. And I wonder if that could kind of bridge us to the topic of MICOP's media kind of world that y'all have. Y'all manage a radio station and a really nice website too. If folks want to learn more about MICOP, go to mixteco.org. And there's just tons of information here. But do you want to tell the audience a bit about the radio station and any other kind of like media stuff? Because y'all were spreading information out really early in the pandemic in these languages, right? To make sure people knew how to handle this thing.
Yeah, I can start in Genevieve added to that. So in 2004, about that time, we had the opportunity to apply for our license to build our own community radio station, right? And I would just want to give kudos to Radio Bilingüe, because that's kind of like the godfather who brought us into the radio world, because we didn't know anything about that. So, we got into that, and we also want to appreciating and thanks to the strong leaders that got involved at pretty early stage on the stage of building these community radio stations. So in 2017, March of 2017, officially we were able to be on air through FM. This is a small community radio station, just only being able to people in Ventura County to go on the 94.1 FM and listen to our radio. But people in Santa Barbara, Santa Maria, we created these different apps that they can download it on their cell phones, smartphones, and they can go to our website online and listen to Radio Indigena online. But the cool part about Radio Indigena, I feel like there is a combo from different kind of outlets, that we added to it, just to be able to reach out to different audience in our communities. So, during the pandemic, we realized that Facebook is one of the main sources where farm workers were getting information. So we added all these kind of like equipments to be able to do live streaming, through Facebook, and our radio Indigena DJs were able to be through FM, be online, and at the same time be on Facebook Live. And many of the materials that were developed are still in indigenous languages, in Mixteco and Zapoteco, Purépecha, Spanish. We have some PSAs developed in Triqui language, and also in some PSAs and I want to say Wabe language. So we have all these different kind of, and a lot of our team were basing or getting information for the CDC portal, and then translating this into PSAs and audio materials or video materials, because our indigenous language are phonetic, not necessarily we can write it, and hoping that people will be able to read it and understanding, for what Genevieve covered earlier, for the different variants that exist among indigenous languages. So audio is the best way to go on informing and doing outreach to our communities. It can be through videos, it can be through PSAs, or recording something that people can listen to. So that's pretty much what we have developed. Genevieve.
Yeah, I will say the one thing that I will add kind of to Arsenio's point about how audio is best, and just so that folks tuning in can get a sense of just how different the variants are. We had an offer to get some posters printed, and what we wanted the posters to say is the people united will never be divided. And so we had one of our folks transcribe it into Mixteco, had a couple folks proofread it, and then we got the posters printed, about 3,000. And when we got the posters, there was controversy at the MICOP office, because for half of the folks, it was the people united will never be divided, and for the other half of the folks, it's the people's fault. So something as like that can get misconstrued into a whole other different language or different meaning than what we had originally anticipated. So those are very controversial flyers that we had, our posters. They were gorgeous, though. Controversial.
Which poster was that?
It was the poster where we wanted it to say "The people united will never be divided" in Mixteco, and then for some of the folks, it's the people's fault.
Oh man, that makes it a little difficult, doesn't it?
Yeah, definitely does.
Oh boy. Okay, so that is super interesting. So you guys got to start a podcast. I thank you for coming on to mine, but you should start a podcast. But you also do a really good job. Let me just promote y'all with the Instagram. That's kind of how I became familiar with what was going on. And as you can see here, I mean, you guys cover all the way to Oxnard and Ventura and here in Santa Maria, but organizing workers in the fields. And I found it really interesting, the story. I can't find the footage here. I don't know if it's up anymore, but there was some footage of the strike from Santa Maria. But like you said, you guys also are sharing information and all other kinds of stuff. But something I found really fascinating was how organizers with organizers with MICOP that I talked to here locally said that they kind of got these farm workers to start using social media to their benefit, and kind of activating and getting more people out to this kind of protest that they arranged. I mean, so you talked about Facebook, but is social media a big part of kind of what you do as well?
I would say yes, because it's kind of to what Arsenio was alluding to earlier. We have to get creative, right? So with Facebook and Instagram, for example, we get opportunities to do videos, to do the audio, to pair it with something visual, to help promote the work. I think one thing that we're cognizant of having to balance is our audience, right? Because our audience is there's a couple folks in the audience, right? It's our community that we serve. It's allies in the broader community. It's funders, quite frankly. And so
Yeah,
making sure that also our work is dynamic enough to be palatable for all of those different audiences that we're trying to intersect with. Um, but yeah, just making sure that how what we're putting out is eye catching, is gets your attention, right? And can be
yeah.
understood in the different languages, right?
Yeah, and that's what you have here on the YouTube channel as well, right?
Yeah.
Uh, Congrats, y'all have more subscribers than I do. Uh, so keep it up. But so you release this information in multiple languages and in multiple ways. And like I said, this was an early. I remember the county did an early survey of folks and what they knew about different aspects of coronavirus, and very early on the farm worker and the indigenous community they were on top of it. They knew stuff about the virus, and I have to believe that this had something to do with it, right? But what are some other challenges that that the community faces? Because I know with employment, obviously they're relied upon to carry on their shoulders this $1 billion industry on the Central Coast for while without enjoying citizenship in a lot of cases and all the services that come with that. But then there's actually, let's talk about that as well, because you also does MICOP provide immigration services or anything like that, and if so, what does that entail? Then we can kind of get into maybe some of the political stuff of it, if you guys can. I don't know what type of nonprofit you are, but what do you like? What are the services that MICOP provides in regards to immigration?
Go for it, Arsenio.
So a few years ago, I don't remember exactly when, we started what is called the outreach and education, basically on in terms with immigration related topics, meaning like supporting our team to get to know their rights. If
Hmm.
they were detained by any ICE officer or an immigration officer, what to do and what not to do. And also like the remedies that exist there, right? There were some people who might be victim of a crime and they file a police report, but they never thought that they might be eligible for a U visa, for example, remedies, or people who wants to do the citizenship, or they want to start their process of a permanent residence. So it was mostly information, and that was for like 3-4 years. By doing that work, doing that outreach and education, we realized that there were very limited resources in terms with immigration legal services that are linguistically and culturally appropriate to this population, right? So it's mostly to what it happens here in the organization, that when you start doing something, you realize that the need is it's bigger, or there is these other needs. So just being encouraged or pushed by that, or having pressure by that, we started exploring on creating our own immigration legal services in the organization, and that's what we did. And fortunately, last year we started by hiring I think it was almost 3 years ago. I'm dying. So there was a person who was interested to be a volunteer with our organization, but at the same time to support her to start their accreditation process, with the Department of Justice, to be able to provide these legal services to our community. So it was a mutual support. We supported her to go through that process, and then she supported us to provide these legal services to our community. So 3 years later, we got, we worked harder and we got some kind of funding support. And currently we have a staff of one full-time immigration lawyer or attorney
Wow.
in our staff who is doing both offices in Santa Maria and Oxnard. And we have one full-time DOJ accredited person who is providing these, who is accredited to provide these legal services. We have our case workers who are trilinguals, providing still that education and outreach component, but also managing the cases of our clients. So we're little but and slowly but surely strengthening and building that program in our organization with the hope that at some point we're gonna add another immigration attorney to be just one full-time in Ventura County and one full-time in Santa Barbara. So that's kind of like the path that we're gonna go. Interesting enough, we are also working with the state of California by one of the fellowships that they have, the programs. So they through that.
Which one is that?
The Removal Defense. I don't know exactly the whole name, but it's Removal Defense Fellowship it's through the California Department of Social Services.
Wow.
So we are able to hire 2 full-time attorneys, to only take cases for removal defense, meaning like those cases that not many lawyers want to take it because it's pretty hard to fight or to win those cases, right? It's when a person is already being put and already in the process of deportation. So you need to act pretty quickly and do that. So that's another program that we have. And we also started another program that is working with those youth or children that are being crossing the border by themselves, unaccompanied minors.
Yes.
The program is called Opportunities for Youth. And the goal of this program is to provide merely like basic support to these youth. We want these youth that while their cases is moving forward, because some of these cases may take 2, 3, or 4 years, for the judge or to see an immigration judge. While these youth are waiting, we want to make sure that these youth have a base of support, that they have a mentor, that they are enrolled in school, and that they know other resources that where they can get involved and not feeling that isolation or isolated by themselves and not really know what to do in these cases. So that's another kind of project or programs that we have here in terms with around immigration issues.
I see. And from a policy perspective, like how, I mean, it hasn't been a year of this current administration yet, but have you noticed a change since then? I mean, how big was the change from, the Trump administration from the Obama administration? I know Obama did do quite a lot of deportation and, enforcement, immigration enforcement. What has it been like for organizers with MICOP on the ground, talking with people? Has there been an increase? Or, I mean, what you just said, I want to get to the unaccompanied minors because that just sounds, you have this whole program dedicated just to that. But, what has the landscape looked like on the Central Coast for immigration over the past couple administrations?
Yeah, I mean, I think we definitely saw that shift and that, I don't want to say lack of confidence, it's not the right way of putting it, but we definitely saw that shift, right, when the Trump administration came in January, 2017. I feel like a lot of what our communities were feeling during his administration, was that concern around deportation, immigration, ICE, as well as public charge. We saw a lot of our families disenrolling from public services because they didn't want that to impact, down the line when they do apply, right, for that. A lot of our work was again around knowing your rights, what to do if you get stopped, right, to make sure you don't sign anything, handing out those little red cards so that our folks knew, okay, like this is a sequence and this is the process. Like to your point, we're not a whole year into the Biden administration, but that messaging around public charge has changed since that got thrown out. But I would still say we're still living with the residual impacts, right? We're still living with folks still concerned about public charge, even though we're letting them know that it's okay. Unfortunately, what we're seeing with the Biden administration is, in a way, a continuance of a lot of these policies. We're not calling them kids in cages anymore. We're calling them children detention facilities, right?
Yeah, unaccompanied minors. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a slickness that makes it quote unquote more palatable, but the reality is it's the same. It's the same, and I think that's why our work is just as important now as it was during the Trump administration.
So you're seeing no change at all, essentially.
I think as long as we have those kids in cages, as long as our dreamers and DACA students and youth are used as political football, there's no change for us, right? I think for us as an Indigenous-led organization representing Indigenous communities, we've migrated up and down this continent for the last 3,000 years, and these man-made borders, that's, as long as that's still in place, right? There's no change for us.
Well, damn, and it's interesting because we were talking about the language barrier earlier, and it's interesting because here in America, there and there's countless videos where we see that go viral of people losing their minds in grocery stores or whatever else, telling people you need to speak English, right? And they're angry when they hear Spanish, and this is the kind of ethno-nationalism that has become, fly that flag with pride under the Trump era, right? But like you said, we still have, not everybody who votes for Trump is the person who says that. Like, people often say that. Is that a dynamic that Indigenous people face in Mexico with Spanish and their languages? You were talking about that earlier, like feeling like your native language isn't worth anything. How does, and I appreciated earlier, Arsenio, when you brought up history, how much are we dealing with the echo or reverberations, or really just the continuation of colonialism when we're having these conversations?
I think we're still dealing with colonialism and the result of a colonialism process, right? And all these consequences, and the narrative that I constantly keep hearing is about, like what you just said, when in terms with we're here, there's even some people that are saying, like, speak America. What does that mean, America? So I think it's just reminding those people that the importance of getting to know their own history, right? What is the history of this continent? I think that we are as Indigenous people, we are in the position to say we are, the originals, if I can say it, or native people on this land, right? All the way to north to south, and when they say, like, you are in America, speak America, it makes no sense for me what they're talking about, because I can be a Mexican and I'm still in America,
Mm-hmm.
And
yeah,
if I want to be like, which oftentimes I don't say it, but if I want to be rude or making it like, I think you need to learn how to speak Mixteco, or you need to learn how to speak Zapoteco or Nahuatl, or some of these languages that they were here before the invasion, because I don't like to call it like the conquista, conquest, or it was an invasion. It's taking away what belongs to Indigenous people, right? Bringing all these different kind of way of doing it. So when you asked me about if it's the situation similar to Mexico, I think to better answer to that, I think being in Mexico, I think there's a difference, because it's a play there as citizenship. At least you are not debating that thing. You are illegal, quote unquote. You are not that narrative, like you don't belong here. You are illegal here. You're not hearing that from your own country. But as Indigenous people, and I don't want to speak on behalf of all Indigenous people, because I'm just one person in these communities and that. But I think from personal experience and what I have seen on speaking with friends, family, and the work that I do is that in Mexico here, indigenous, or in the whole world, indigenous people are, intentionally, there is like weapons that is being developed intentionally to erase us from the
Hmm. Yeah.
planet. So sometimes it's not a matter if you're in Mexico here, it's just being in indigenous people and just identify yourselves. And there's this fear, because at the end this is about power, being afraid to like lose this power, because while if you're still gonna see indigenous people walking in this mother earth, in this planet, you're still seeing the owners of these lands, and that what makes you afraid. It's still, if I'm gonna start using my voice and claiming to what is mine, I think that's when it comes. I think at the end, that's what it is. And that's what it's always been, here or there. So I think it's just like going back a little bit. I think when there's all these, and discrimination is part of this life. And I think what I'm glad about right now, I think, is what I've been seeing. I think I can just only speak most on the experience that when I came here in this country in 2003, and what I've been seeing right now. That's the only I can share, is that at least there is this change of not normalized, but I think the more you hear it, the better you remember, right? So when 2003 was pretty hard for people to say I'm undocumented. At least right now we're seeing a little bit of this, like, okay, we know there is this population in our backyards. We have these communities here, and it's an important population that is part of our society, right? And I've been seeing more children for our indigenous communities to feel at least more comfortable to speak their language, speak Spanish, and speak English. So um, I just wanna be on that. I wanna stay with that a little bit in terms of celebration, and just seeing that the more you have keep resisting, the more you're gonna keep not like preserving who you are. And I think that's kind of our message oftentimes to our communities. Don't be afraid, don't be ashamed, don't feel less. You are part of this community. You need to celebrate your identity, keep your language. And we're feeling pressure, but we're learning these languages. But I also want to be careful. There's people who will never gonna learn English, and it's not a reason of why the system needs to say, like, I'm not going to support you because you are not learning the language.
Hmm.
I think what we're fighting here is a human right. This is a basic human rights, regardless if you speak a language or not. You're a human.
Absolutely.
I kind of wanted to touch base a little bit on what Arsenio was talking about, as like far as weaponizing. And I'm super upfront. I am not Mixteca or Zapoteca, and everything I'm sharing is what I've learned, right?
Hmm.
As a co-conspirator in this work. I don't want to say ally. I want to say co-conspirator in the work that
Cool.
MICOP does, all the good trouble we get into. But one thing that was pointed out to me is how our community even refers to their own language, right? And so I apologize to any Mixteco speakers. I apologize to you, Arcenio, for butchering this, but because it's a tonal language, so I say I can't hear the tone. But our community will oftentimes refer to their language as Tundavi, which is the word of the poor, right? When really it's Tunsavi, which is the word of the rain. And I think there's such a power, right, to say I speak the word of the rain. And yet the weapon that the colonizers gave us was you speak the word of the poor. And to have it so institutionalized that that's how we refer to ourselves, right? So that's a lot of what MICOP and other indigenous organizations across California and even in Mexico are trying to undo that work, undo that mindset of your language is valuable, like your heritage is valuable, your culture is valuable, and it's not just the word of the poor, right? Let's recognize that it's this connection to Mother Earth, the word of the rain, the word of the clouds, and let's reclaim that.
Yeah, I've done reporting on our local Chumash, and I mean their language was eradicated and destroyed, and so they're like writing children's songs now out of this language in an attempt to resurrect it. Do you all ever connect or interface with California Indigenous groups or anything like that? What do you ever do any collaborations or anything with groups out here on the Central Coast?
We started doing that connections. We know Chumash leaders. I would just want to give just one example, and I think that's not to blame it, not taking responsibility, but I think it has to do with our education system. I went here to Oxnard Law School learning history. I went to Oxnard College, but when I took a history class, always they were referring to indigenous people in this part, like something that was in the past and they don't exist anymore. Similar to what is the education in Mexico, right? So they don't talk about indigenous as they are here and they're present here. So in my ignorance, I was thinking too much they no longer exist until I was able to be in this part of this advocacy work in terms with Padre Sarah, I think, in Santa Barbara. I went to one of the assembly expecting that I will see only like those people that are standing for social justice and allies and all that. My surprise was to get into that room and see a full, like hundreds of indigenous leaders from Chumash communities and other indigenous communities of California. And it was just like a moment for me to say, wow, we're here. They are here, and that was a moment for me to also starting doing some kind of connections and reaching out, but also that motivates our own organization to be mindful, to be careful, to be respectful, that every time we're going to do like a gathering, we need to acknowledge that we are in the land of our brothers and sisters from the Chumash communities. And we need to be respectful to say we're not coming here to take or to own this. We're here and asking for permission. So I think that's one is a small step, but it's important to do that. That's a step. And that's good that you're mentioning about them unfortunately losing their Chumash language, because that's a big problem that's happening with indigenous communities around the global. And us as a Mixteco is not exception. So that's I always quote this historian or writer from the Mije communities in Oaxaca, Yasnaya. She said this. She said, "We are saying that languages are dying, but our indigenous languages are not dying. Our indigenous languages are being killed. We're killing our indigenous language." And I would just stay with that. And I want to say it firmly that that's what this colonialism is doing to us. And we need to change that, acknowledge that and change it, because I think we deserve to still be able to visualize this world from our own dimension and our own language as indigenous people.
And I think to Arsenio's point, just recognizing that we are guests on this land, and whatever movements that our Chumash brothers and sisters are working on, to also be supportive of that. So, a couple weeks ago, I went out to a rally, and it was about the missing children and the children that, were lost at residential schools, but also tying it in locally to California's mission system and how many children and relatives are buried on the grounds of these missions. A lot of them are still active as Catholic churches, right?
Yep.
And so, bringing awareness to that, some of the work that I'm doing around climate justice, environmental preservation, and working in collaboration and in partnership and in networks with the Chumash up in Santa Ynez and their environmental justice work group. And again, how can we just be good stewards, right? Good stewards of the land.
I see. Chewy is in the comments there. Chewy, I believe, is Chumash. And he's been directly involved with organizing against the Juniper Serra statues in the area. And yeah, that is a big thing. I mean, there was a few years ago, like a mass grave or a grave of thousands discovered at Santa Ynez, or it was kind of known it was there, but it was documented. Sorry, Chewy, he is not Chumash. And it was documented there with like ground penetrating radar that there were thousands of people buried there. And I also did reporting years ago about the Chumash led one of the largest uprising rebellions against the mission system in the right near the end of the mission era, right in like the 1820s, I believe, or maybe it was the 1830s. It's been a while since I wrote that story, but and it's interesting because you're right. In this area growing up, we learn about the Chumash, but it's very much like what we read Island of the Blue Dolphins, right? And the last woman on Santa Cruz Island, and then they came and took her away, and she died too. But I had a friend talk to me about this story that I had written, and he's Chumash, and we hardly ever talked about it, and he just said, thanks for writing that. He's like, but this is a thing, like, we all knew about the rebellion growing up, but nobody, it was like a thing that just didn't get covered. So it's interesting how this is a big debate that's going on too, the study of history in public education. Crazy right wingers right now, they're mad about masks, but last week it was critical race theory, right? And that's any mention of people of color and their place in history that isn't told from a white ethnocentric lens. You're doing a critical race theory now, and that's bad according to the right wing, right? But we see this, and you see how it isolates not just us from our history and us from each other, but also, like you said, like populations of indigenous folk who could be working together or be connected. And like you said, you're removed from that as well. Everybody gets removed from it. If, like you said, they've been facing open eradication for generations, for centuries now.
I was fortunate enough to be on a panel, the virtual panel last year with one of the Chumash organizers, Brother Marcos, and what he said has stuck with me. And he said, imagine a world where Indigenous people didn't have to be so resilient. Like, I think oftentimes we lean into our resiliency, right? And that's great. But I think, what would our world look like if we didn't have to do that? If we were allowed to just thrive and exist and not have to think about these things like colorism, colonialism, and what else could be
genocide.
Yeah. And so, we're here, like, despite that. So it just, and that just stuck with me.
Wow. Oh, Arsenio, you have anything to add?
No, I think when I heard that, because it's not first time I heard from Genevieve sharing those words from Brother Marcos, it's just like, it makes me think a lot and deeply, because for many times when I learned the word resiliency, we're very resilient as Indigenous people, I was kind of also normalizing this, but when someone comes, not criticizing, but giving you a different perspective, you start thinking about it, just going deep into it, like, and the question maybe is like, why always us? Like, why we need to be put in that position to always be in that? I mean, and also, like, us coming from Mexico, you keep hearing about learn this language, and telling to our children. At what point we're gonna stop that and say, like, let's learn our languages? Like, you speaking your own language is fine, but let's all learn other languages. I think make it as a choice, not forcing it to us. So I think that's only telling us that we're still pretty far to where we want to be, but also that is telling us that this is because of what happens to this continent, to the invasion and creating this is our system that we have is being based on racism and there's it's not only inequalities but inequities and all that, and this and being putting like these what is called people of color, Indigenous people, Black communities, and then disadvantages. But I think it's important to know those histories. It's important to understand why farm workers are low paid jobs. Why are they suffering a lot? Let's learn about the history of agriculture in this country. First being Indigenous people, then Black communities, and Asian communities more recently, then Mexicanos with Abracero programs, and now more recently, indigenous people. We are already in 60-70% of our ag force being represented by indigenous migrant communities. And if we go to like how much we have made to create better conditions in these workplaces, not that much. If we look into what it was to what is right now, those issues that you were seeing 100 or 200 years ago still are some of those issues that still you see this. So at what point we, as being part of these consumers, populations, that we are, getting benefits from these hands, from these bodies, at one point we're gonna say enough is enough, and let's get together and let's make real changes for these populations, for these group of workers, because they do deserve to be getting to have enough to support their families, to support their children, and to have like houses where they can have their space, and those children to have a private space where they can be productive on learning. Because during the COVID, if we hear a constant problem in our population is youth not having enough internet, youth not having enough space, private space for them to be taking their classes, not enough computers. They were not having their parents because they have to be working and still be at risk that their parents will come back and be exposed with COVID and not making enough money. So there's all these problems. So I think that's still, as we are living in a system of abuse, taking advantage on others, but not want to take responsibility to that. So I think that's the invite that I'm making tonight. What can we do to support at least this population, right?
Yeah, and like you said, I mean, it says deep roots in settler colonialism, capital accumulation capitalism. Of course, I mean, slavery was forced agricultural labor, and as you said, we have all these internesting factors that affect it, and like you said, I mean, all workers deserve the ability to organize, and that's what I really was impressed by. MICOP was coming in immediately, organizing a group of ununionized farm workers. They're posting to social media, they're getting people riled up, like getting people out there. But there was recently in the vein of this kind of settler colonial capitalist accumulation exploitative project, the Supreme Court recently made a decision that bars union organizing on farmland. Now, can you tell me about, was this a case you guys were following? Did it immediately have repercussions on how y'all organize? Because I noticed a few of these videos that I enjoy seeing on Instagram. Organizers are out on a field. They're on the side of a field talking to folks. Is that now illegal under the Supreme Court's decision?
I think that's the key word, Joe. On the side of the field, right? On the side, because we've done this work, enough to know, these are private properties, right? Even going back to like when the Thomas fire was hitting our region and we were trying to pass out N95 masks, some of our volunteers got escorted off these fields by sheriffs for trespassing, for trying to provide protections to workers, right? So we know well enough, and that's why it's on the side, like on the very public-facing side of the road. But
the frontage road.
No, but it was something definitely that we had our pulse on, and it's a ruling, but it's not the end, right? It's not the end of the work. I think there's a lot to be said about the models of organizing that we employ at MICOP, really leveraging the Cesar Chavez house model, a house meeting model, right? Going to workers in their homes versus out on the field, right? I think my understanding, and Arsenio, please correct me if I'm wrong, is that there's not a lot of folks that are out there unionizing farm workers, right? And so I think that's going to be the next tall order is how do we get that that backing right to these workers. But yeah, I just wanted to name it the side of the road, so they don't.
Yeah, of course.
Well, sorry, I don't know if you wanted to add anything.
No, I'm just gonna say that let's be clear. We are a 501c3. We're a community nonprofit organization. We are doing organizing, but mostly leaning toward helping workers to know their rights, helping them to know that they have the right to organize themselves. That's something that they have the right to do, and we are here to support workers. One thing that we don't want people to believe that we're not a union, and we cannot represent workers. That's pretty clear. We cannot negotiate on behalf of workers. We can support workers to be there with them, because sometimes, not sometimes, I think there is a reality with for many of our workers, farm workers. I want to be specifically to farm workers.
Mm-hmm.
There is not really out there another group or a base of support for these workers where they can feel safe, or they can have trust, other than our organization. So that's a kind of like, quote unquote, a privilege for us to have that trust, an honor to have that trust with these workers. But at the same time, it's unfortunate that we're leaving our workers alone, because in Ventura County, there's no longer a union organizing workers, and while out there in the communities, the narrative that we keep hearing is that there is a strong union organizing workers. Why they're asking so much, or why we're fighting for so much other right to workers when they already have a union who represent them. But if you come and look and ask for workers, if they know who union is or where they can go and all that, workers, they don't have that support. So uh, it seems like we are the only organization, and we're not going to say no to workers if they're reaching out to us, because they trust us, and we're here for our communities. We're here for our people, and we're going to be with them, supporting them, but we believe that they do have the power. They can negotiate for what they want, right? Sometimes I can have my own opinions. I can
Yeah.
say, don't fight for 10 cents. Don't fight for a dime. Fight for a bigger. You deserve more than
Yeah.
5 cents.
Yeah.
So, but at the
Yeah.
end is on the workers, what they want to do. We just we are here to support them.
Yeah. And to reiterate, MICOP, like you said, it's not a union, it's a nonprofit. And in fact, was awarded, chosen as 2021 Nonprofit of the Year. This is by Central Coast State Senator, California State Senator Monique Limon. Sorry about that, Monique Limon. I think quite astutely, the Santa Barbara Independent puts in the subhead, award comes when Supreme Court takes away infield organizing. But why don't you tell me a little bit about this distinction? First of all, congrats. Y'all deserve it for everything you're doing. But tell me a bit about it.
There's not that much I can say. I hope Genevieve has more, other than appreciating Senator Monique Limon for the award. I think my only comment that I keep saying, right, is terms like, yes, it comes on the right time. We're celebrating our 20th anniversary. I don't think she knows when she chose us to be the nonprofit of the year. This is our 20th anniversary. We are very proud to put our names out there in the state. Given to the history of the organization, it started with a family nurse practitioner and a group of leaders, with no budget. It's just like volunteer work, in 2001 to right now, having 4 offices, different locations, having a team of, a little bit more than 100 people on our staff, and just giving the impact of the work. So I think it feels really good. But I want to say too that we need to recognize and acknowledge that oftentimes this nonprofit that is being led by people of color, they're not being getting that much, not only attention, but investment, right? Oftentimes this nonprofit, they need that support. They need to be trusted by donors, by funders, because they are the ones who really makes the work possible. So that's something that I think we need to like put more attention to when it comes down to nonprofit like MICOP, like the importance work that the type of organizations as MICOP is doing for these communities, that if it's were not for MICOP or our organization, nobody else will be there for our population. So yes, definitely getting this award, it's been great and feeling really good, but want to highlight the importance of supporting nonprofit like MICOP, and appreciating our own team as well, because I think that they are the really ones who are being making this work possible.
And people can go to mixteco.org and make a donation, as we can see here. But so, and I encourage everybody to do that. But one other thing you talked about, Arsenio, like celebrating the culture. And I know we're late to the game and it's already passed, but tell us about Guelaguetza. I know Santa Maria's Guelaguetza, but y'all do the Oxnard one. What is Guelaguetza? And man, it always looks and sounds and tastes, for me, I love the food, like so much fun.
I think yes, it's a celebration. I just want to say that this is an event that come from more than an event. It's like a practice that is very rooted to the Zapoteco culture, or the Zapoteco nation in the state of Oaxaca, right? Guelaguetza means like giving, offering, right? It's a mutual support from one another, and that was the whole intention of this in the state of Oaxaca, bringing together different communities, different groups that represent, because in the state of Oaxaca you have 8 different regions, right? And beside those regions, each of these regions, they have their own different indigenous communities. Out of those 68 indigenous nations in Mexico that still are alive, at least 17 to 18 of these indigenous nations are only in the state of Oaxaca. So the whole intention was bringing this group together and share, right, what was being produced in your area, and just mutual exchange and support. So, and that's through food, through dance, through music, through language. You speak Spanish, but also you hear other indigenous languages. So when a Oaxaqueño leaves their own lands, and I don't know, I think that happens for us, that we leave our own, native lands or communities. You start missing your lands more than before. So it's well known that wherever a Oaxaqueño person goes, it will bring the Guelaguetza with him, or with her, or with them. So that's the case with the indigenous people in Santa Maria. They brought their Guelaguetza. Let's celebrate, right? So let's bring people together and celebrate who we are. But at the same time, I think in Oxnard we started doing this celebration a few years ago, but also was with the intention to tell other people that we're here, that we're part of this city, and other Mexicanos, right? Let's feel proud of our diversity, rather than feeling like why you're not speaking Spanish or why you're not speaking English. Like, let's celebrate this diversity and this colorful, and I think that's what the celebration is behind this Guelaguetza theme. But I'm not also ignoring the real issues and challenges that we're facing, right? So
of course not.
Yeah.
But that is a beautiful thing, and like you said, with all this what would life be like if we didn't have to be so resilient all the time? Maybe we could have a whole lot more Guelaguetzas and food and dance. And this picture here is actually from Santa Maria's Guelaguetza from years ago, and it's just always something that it's interesting, because living in Santa Maria, we we have an incredible amount of diversity just in Santa Maria. Like you said, with indigenous communities, we have Zapotecs and Mixtecs and but then as far as just people from Central and South America and the Caribbean, Santa Maria, I know Peruvians, I know Colombians, I know Cubans, I know Puerto Ricans. There's just folks from everywhere here, and so it's really nice to have something that just exists for the Oaxacan community. And then just the food. You could probably tell by looking at me, that I like the food.
Yeah, I just want to also not forget, and I want to just name this, right. We also being ignoring another sector of our communities and our Mexico, and it's the African Mexican populations. It's something that we need to do more in terms of not recognizing only, but coming together, right, to know about challenges that they have gone through, that recognition that they need. And there's a lot of movement in Mexico to recognize that communities, the African Mexican communities. And I'm glad to say that in our groups, on our communities here, that community is represented. We have leaders from the African American, African Mexican communities, and there was just a celebration in Northern California, in Napa and Sonoma, where we saw these dances, coming from these communities. So let's not forget that other sector of our population, because that's what it is. Mexico is, right. This is what a diversity is.
I see. Agreed. Absolutely. Is there anything else y'all can think to add about your organization? Maybe anything we didn't cover? I know you do health services. There's all kind. I'm sure there's stuff we've ignored, but it really is. There's so much that MICOP does. It really is impressive.
Yeah, I know, Genevieve. I'm sorry, but before I forget, we have a night in Oaxaca coming up. If people wants to support and sponsor, that will be on October 15th. They can send us an email. They can look at us in our Facebook, Instagram. They can know more about the sponsorship opportunities there. And I just want to say that we didn't talk too much about our youth group. We have our Tequio youth group, who is doing a lot of work around self-identity and indigenous or indigenous identity leadership development, but also supporting youth to be successful in higher education. So we have our scholarship program. That's something that people might be interested to support as well, these indigenous students. So, and we have other programs that is leaning to where working with families and children's and all that. So I don't know, Genevieve, if you have anything else.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like we could come back and fill another hour with everything we didn't cover, quite frankly. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of to what we talked about at the beginning. A lot of our programs come up because there is that need, or because community's not getting the service elsewhere in the community, and I think that's what's powerful, and that's what's impactful about the work. I know one of the programs that I'm really excited that we're going to be able to continue is Healing the Community, and it's the first iteration was Healing the Soul, and it was basically talking to community members about mental health. And I think the mental health conversation is so important, especially as we continue to live with the COVID-19 pandemic, right? And we're seeing that mental health impacts. And so for us, and in our communities and in our language, we might not call it stress, anxiety, depression, but we do call it something. And so part of it was, what do we call it? And then what causes it? And then what do we do about it? And how can we meld those indigenous practices, like, certain herbs, making teas, vapor baths, and how can we meld that with what Western contemporary, like with what Western society deems as, mental health. And so we're launching the next iteration of that. It's Healing the Community. Healing the Soul was more of an evaluative component, and now we're looking to scale that up. And so I think it's timely. It's timely, especially as, like I said, we're still dealing with COVID-19 impacts, and how can we support our indigenous community, our farm worker community, and documented community with their mental health.
Absolutely. Well, as I've been constantly referencing it and throwing it on the screen, and here on the screen is here as well. It's mixteco.org. Everybody should know about MICOP in our community. It's very impressive, all the things, immigration lawyers on staff and juggling a radio station and outreach here and labor organizing. It really is impressive what y'all do. And I noticed I've been wanting y'all on for a while. I've just been lagging on it, to be real. But then you got this award, so congrats on the award. And thanks again for coming on the show. Where can folks find MICOP? We know mixteco.org, but which social media platforms? I was aware of the Twitter and the Instagram, MICOP805, but you said Facebook as well?
Yes, we're on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube. I think the youth have a Snapchat and a TikTok, if I'm not mistaken. Not for
kids these days.
I'm of the generation where if the TikTok is good enough to leave the platform and end up on Instagram, that's where I'll watch it. But yeah, I believe they have the TikTok and the TikTok. They have TikTok and Snapchat, and then even our programs have their own pages on Facebook. So the main page would be, Facebook, MICOP805, but the radio has its own Facebook page, and it's got about 10,000 followers, and different programs: Healing the Soul, Living with Love, Connecting with My Peers, Labor Organizers. They have their own little subsections of pages. So we're there. You just gotta look for us.
Just got to go find it. Anything else either you care to add? Thanks again for coming on the show tonight.
Appreciating you, appreciating inviting us and just spend this hour and a half with you. It's just been great. I think it's just so important to just let it go, let it out there, like letting people know that we're here, and that we welcome everyone who wants to join us, support us, be part of us. I think we're part of a movement that will stay for a lot more years. We're building strong leaders, and I'm very hopeful that our organization will go for 20 more years. So yes, you can be with us. So I appreciate you so much for giving us all this time.
Oh, well, you bet. I impressed by the work, and there's so much of it, translation services, and having friends who grew up indigenous in Santa Maria Valley, and just hearing from them all the different things that they deal with and that their parents had to deal with. I'm just glad that there's an organization, and hey, happy birthday, 20 years. That's not too bad. And, hopefully there'll be more growth, and this can serve as just kind of, a flag for people to go, what's MICOP all about? Well, here's an interview. People can share this and let everybody know, and donate MICOP. And it's funny, if you go to the website really quick, if people didn't notice, the donate is a little heart up here. You get to click a little heart, and it'll take you to donations. So share the love, spread the love. But anywho, thanks again, Arsenio and Genevieve. I'll end the show here in a second, but thanks for coming on, and have a good night.
Thank you so much.
You bet. Have a good one. All right. So my wonderful guest with MICOP, that's the Mixteco Indigena Community Organizing Project. They're based on the Central Coast out here in Ventura County and Santa Barbara County. I'm here in northern Santa Barbara County, Santa Maria Valley, California. Very important organization, and they do all kinds of work out here. So check them out at mixteco.org and on all those social medias. We talked about it. Y'all know what to do. But this concludes my regular Friday show. I'm trying to be flexible, y'all. I'm not, only doing one thing all the time, my usual news breakdown. I thought this was an important interview to share with y'all here in this kind of live interview format. If you haven't already, please, like the stream, share it, do all the things you got to do to please the demonic algorithms that rule our lives here on these platforms. But if you didn't know, you can find me on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, YouTube, Twitch, and if I already said Facebook, where I try to go live most Friday nights. That could change. Stay tuned, stay connected with me here. But again, thank you everybody for being here. and we will see you next time. Got a comment here. I just want to say, Radical Democrat says, good interview from what I heard. You can go back and listen to the whole thing. Great folks here with MICOP, the Mixteco Indigena Community Organizing Project out here on the Central Coast of California, doing really important work with a community that is often overlooked and faces, discrimination of all kinds, as my guests explained. But I'm going to bid you all adieu. Have a good night. Left is best. And we'll see you next time here on Political Payne. Keep an eye on my Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram for the next time that might be. So have a good night, everybody.